They were already through security when I stopped walking. My feet didn't listen to them anymore. I could see them up ahead near gate C17, all of them standing in a loose half circle, laughing. Their bags rolled neatly behind them like obedient pets. I stayed back by the coffee stand, pretending to read the screen on my phone. But I wasn't looking at anything. My fingers were cold. Hannah turned to look for me. She didn't see me at first. Then she spotted me behind the glass case of muffins and did that thing with her mouth, half smile, half warning. It's like I was supposed to keep moving. It's like I was slowing them down. That's when I knew I had felt it building for weeks. The subtle avoidance, the group chats that went quiet when I entered the room, the way they made all their plans at David and Hannah's house and told me after everything was booked. But I hadn't let myself believe it. Not fully. Not until that moment, standing in the fluorescent glow of a Monday morning airport, watching my own family try not to look guilty. I had paid for every ticket, used my card, not theirs. Even David's business class upgrade, that was me. Hannah had insisted it would be better for his back. I had nodded, clicked confirm, and told myself it was fine. That this is what mothers do. They pay. They don't ask. They're grateful for crumbs of inclusion. But when I asked the night before if I should bring a jacket, Hannah looked up from her phone and said casually, like it wasn't a blade, "Oh, didn't David tell you? There was a mix-up. There are only 5 seats, and they're all taken." I said nothing. I even smiled. Said I understood. Said I could just change the date on my ticket and maybe come later, on my own. Maybe meet them for dinner one night. Come. Because if I wasn't, I might have broken. But I didn't change the date. I didn't rebook. I didn't cry or beg. Kept quiet. And I drove him to the airport that morning like nothing was wrong. Now here I was, still inside the terminal, watching my family, the one I paid for, boarding a plane I was never meant to be on. David looked back once. He didn't wave. Just looked. As if to check that I was staying where I belonged, outside the picture. I pulled out my phone, opened the bank app, and tapped into the credit account. I hovered over the freeze toggle. My thumb trembled. Not from rage, not even from heartbreak. From something slower, something cleaner, something final dot. And then I pressed it right there. Wow. They were 30 feet from the gate. Just about to scan boarding passes. Just about to buy duty-free perfume. Just about to feel untouchable. I froze every card. Froze the one they used for upgrades. Froze the one they used for the hotel. Froze the one that paid for the resort package. Froze the one with Hannah's spa day. Froze them all like they froze me. Then I turned and walked away. Not fast, not in anger. Just in the quiet way a woman walks when her body finally believes the truth. Her heart has whispered for years. They didn't want me there, but they wanted my wallet. That was the day. I stopped apologizing for being inconvenient, for taking up space, for not dying on time. I didn't wait to see their reaction. Didn't need to. I knew what would come. Panic, voicemails, blame. But it was none of my concern anymore. They left me out, so I walked myself back into the center of my own life. I found a seat by the long windows overlooking the runway. Sat down, watched there. Plane taxi slowly out of the gate. I saw their silhouettes, small heads behind thick glass. My own son, just a smudge behind a pane of privilege I paid for. And for the first time in a long while, felt something that wasn't pain. I felt stillness. I wasn't always this quiet. There was a time I filled every room. My laughter, my cooking, my questions, my love, all of it loud and steady. I was the one who remembered birthdays, booked doctor's appointments, kept the medicine cabinets full. I knew everyone's allergies. I knew who liked their toast burnt and who hated cilantro. That was my language care. Quiet, tireless care. David was always sharp, smarter than me. Everyone said he read early, corrected his teachers, knew how to win arguments before he was even 12. But he was never cruel. Not then. He was a Boy with large eyes who brought me dandelions from the yard and asked if God made them just for me. He used to hold my hand with both of his, like he thought I might vanish. I remember that version of him. I still mourn that version of him. His father left when David was 10. One morning he just packed up the truck and said he was going to the hardware store. He never came back. I had to explain to David why the lawn was never mowed again, why dinner was quieter, why birthdays got smaller. He never asked much, just watched me. I think he made up his mind that day that he'd never rely on anyone but himself. I admired that in him, till he turned it on me. I raised him on a bookkeeper's salary. I worked in a small office where nothing changed except the faces of the clients. I made mistakes, forgot to breathe some days, but I always made sure David had enough. Sometimes I went without so he wouldn't notice the gaps. I told myself it was temporary, that one day, when he was grown and successful, he'd turn back and see me still standing in the shadow, that he'd reach for me. But he didn't. When he met Hannah, I was hopeful. She was smart, well-mannered, confident in that sharp, professional way that made me feel like I should apologize for breathing too loud. She asked me once if I'd ever traveled abroad. I said no. She smiled like that explained everything. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was just the mother, not the story. Over time, I saw it, the slow unraveling, the way they made decisions without me. How holidays went from my kitchen to their house. How traditions were rewritten with me, edited out. It wasn't abrupt. It was a slow fade. It's like someone dimming the lights one click at a time until you don't realize you're sitting in the dark. Still, I tried. I brought gifts I couldn't afford. I cooked dishes no one ate. I laughed at jokes that stung. I listened to stories I wasn't part of. I offered money even when they didn't ask, especially then, 'cause offering made me feel useful even. If they didn't say thank you, especially because they didn't say thank you. The vacation idea came from David. He called one afternoon, rare in itself, and said they were thinking of taking the kids to Hawaii. I said it sounded wonderful. He said it would be tight with expenses. I didn't wait for the ask. I offered. Said I'd be happy to help. He said that would make things easier. I said yes before I'd thought it through. I imagined us all walking on the beach. I pictured the twins chasing waves while I took photos. I even went online and looked at plus-size bathing suits, just in case. That's the version of me they left behind when they boarded that flight. It's the one who still believed in second chances. When the tickets were booked, I wasn't even asked which week worked best. They just told me the dates. I told myself it was fine, that the important part was being included even passively. When they added the hotel upgrades and premium seats, I nodded along, told the bank it was a special family event, told myself it would be worth it. Until the night before, when Hannah said it so lightly that my name wasn't on the list, that there had been a mix-up but all the rooms were full. I laughed, lightly, like it was silly to expect more. Like a child being handed the wrong toy and pretending it's the one they wanted. I remember going to the bathroom right after, locking the door, and standing there for 10 minutes with the tap running, just breathing. It wasn't a mistake. They hadn't forgotten me, They had planned it this way. They wanted the vacation. They just didn't want me in the photo. And somehow, despite the years, despite the giving, I was still the outsider looking in. The woman who raised the man who no longer saw her as necessary. I remember the night David turned 12. I had made him a cake, decorated it myself. He said he didn't want a party, just a pizza night with me. We'd eat on the floor, watching old cartoons, laughing at the same parts. Fell asleep on my shoulder. That was the last birthday he let me plan. It's the last time it felt like we were a team. I keep wondering where it turned. Was it when I started needing help to lift the groceries? Was it the hearing loss? Was it just that I got older, slower, less interesting? Or was it always there, and I was too busy loving to notice the silence growing between us? Whatever it was, by the time we reached the airport, I already knew the answer. They didn't want me. They wanted my yes, my signature, my password. Balance. But not me. The first proof came in a forwarded email. It was sent by mistake. Or maybe not. Maybe it was the only scrap of truth the universe allowed me. Because it knew I needed something I could hold in my hand. The subject line read, "Final confirmation, guest count locked." It was from the resort. A polite thank you for choosing their family package. 5 adults, 2 children, 1 penthouse suite, 1 garden room. Dates confirmed. Credit card ending in 224. My card. I stared at it for a long time. Read it twice, 3 times. Then again, there was no mistake. No missing name. No indication I had ever been part of the plan. The reservation was complete, total, deliberate. 5 adults. David, Hannah, the twins, and Hannah's sister. Not me. I felt like I'd been slapped, but slower. Not a sting, a slow, expanding ache, like a bruise blooming beneath skin. Still, I said nothing. I didn't confront David. I didn't forward the email back with a question mark. I didn't write a single word. Instead, I printed it out. I folded it carefully, slid it into the back of my journal where I kept old receipts, allergy lists, and birth dates written in fading pen. I suppose I needed it for later, for the moment when I would start to doubt myself. When grief tries to rewrite things. When love makes you imagine that maybe you misunderstood. That maybe it wasn't betrayal, just a mix-up. That maybe it didn't hurt, but there it was. Paper doesn't lie. I kept it with me, along with the charge summary from the hotel, the upgrade invoice, the spa reservations, all signed off with the same card. Mine, the digital footprint of a family vacation I wasn't welcome on. The evidence of an erasure carried out with a smile. The second proof came from Mia. She's the housekeeper I used to hire once a month back when I could afford those little luxuries. She now works for Hannah's sister, Tasha. One day she stopped me in the parking lot of the pharmacy, said she saw something funny, she said. But her face didn't look amused. They were talking about you, she whispered. At brunch last week, Hannah said you were better off staying behind. That the trip would be more peaceful without ... expectations. Expectations. That's what I was now. A burden disguised as expectation. I didn't ask for more. I only asked to be remembered. To be included just enough to feel I hadn't disappeared. I never asked for center stage. I only asked not to be cut from the cast. I thanked Mia, hugged her gently, and walked home with trembling hands. It had been weeks since I'd heard David call me Mom. Lately, it was just hey, or nothing at all. The third proof wasn't a thing. It was a moment we were sitting around the kitchen table. A rare Sunday visit. They brought takeout plastic containers set on my old tablecloth. The twins were watching something on their iPads. I had made coffee, the kind David used to like, strong with cinnamon. I brought the cups in, set one in front of him. He didn't look up, just nudged it aside and muttered, "She likes hers black." Not even a thank you, just a correction. For her. That was when I understood my place had shifted. Not beneath their feet, but behind their backs. I was background, a polite inconvenience, a guest in my own kitchen. After they left, I sat in the quiet. The plates were still half full. The coffee untouched. My own breath felt foreign. I watched the condensation on the window disappear into nothing. Then I opened the drawer where I kept old files. I pulled out the bank papers. I reviewed the account names. I looked at the emergency contact lists. I looked at the medical authorizations, the home deed. The auto insurance, every document had me on top. Every line had my signature. Every obligation pointed to me. I had given them the power to forget me, comfortably. It wasn't just the vacation, wasn't even the money. It was the silence they assumed they could bury me in, the trust they used against me. The mother they thought wouldn't notice, but I did notice, and for the first time in my life. I didn't excuse it. I didn't say, well, they're busy. I didn't say, maybe they meant to call. I didn't say, maybe next time. Instead, I I closed the drawer. And I started writing things down: passwords, account numbers, steps to transfer ownership. Notes on what was mine, what they couldn't touch, what I'd quietly take back, not to hurt them, but to remember myself, because if I kept waiting for someone to protect me, I'd die waiting, and I was tired of being erased by the people I built. That night, I didn't cry. I slept the kind of sleep that comes after a long, slow burn. I wasn't angry, not in the way people think. It was deeper than that. A grief that had been mistaken for patience. A love that had been misused for so long it no longer resembled love at all. They thought they could take, and I would smile and nod and refill the bowl. But I wasn't a bowl. I was the hands holding it, and I was about to let go. It happened in the shower. The water had been running too long, and the room filled with steam. I stood there, fully dressed, holding a clean towel I never used. Just standing, not thinking, not moving, just letting the sound of falling water drown out the questions. Something in me shifted that morning, not with anger, not with panic, but with certainty. The kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks. The kind that settles like a stone at the bottom of a well. I looked at myself in the fogged mirror, my face barely visible, my handprint a faint oval on the glass. I looked older than I remembered, but not weak, just unfinished, like a story, interrupted mid-sentence. And I knew then that I couldn't let them write the ending. I turned the water off, dried my hands, sat on the edge of the bed with the towel still folded, still unused. And I made my first quiet promise. No more apologies for being alive. No more offering parts of myself just to stay visible in their world. If I was going to be invisible, I would choose it on my own terms. That afternoon, I started making a list. Not of what they had done, but of what I still had. My name on the house, my account access, my small pension, my safe deposit box key, my recipes in the yellow folder, the quiet comfort of knowing where everything was. That was power too. Small power, silent power. But real. I didn't call anyone, didn't send a warning, didn't ask advice. I went down to the credit union in my old cardigan and flats. Told the woman at the desk I wanted to update access permissions. She smiled too brightly and asked if I needed help with passwords. I didn't. I remembered every digit, every security question. I gave her the names I wanted removed. There were only two: David and Hannah. She paused, asked if I was sure. I was. That night, I took out the old black notebook I hadn't touched since David's graduation party. I flipped past the pages of old guest lists, menus, gift ideas. I began to write again. Only this time it wasn't about them. It was about me. I wrote down what I wanted, not in big, grand ways, just in small, sharp sentences. I want a bed where no one talks over me. I want a morning where no one forgets I exist. I want silence that belongs to me. I want to live without waiting for someone to remember I'm here. I want to stop forgiving what was never apologized for. They say that when women disappear, it's gradual. But this wasn't that. This was a return. A slow, steady return to the self I abandoned every time I smiled through being ignored. I began packing before they left for the trip. Quietly, one drawer at a time. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to leave nothing behind. That mattered. I packed my documents, my medicine, my books, my photographs, the ones from before David met Hannah, the ones where I still had a place at the center of the frame. I left the wedding photos, the framed shots of their housewarming party, the photo of me cropped awkwardly on the edge of the couch holding a tray no one took from my hands. Let them. Keep those. Let them look back at the life they edited me out of. I found a small storage unit near the edge of town. Paid for 6 months in advance. The manager asked if I was downsizing. I said yes. He offered me a free lock and smiled without asking questions. I liked that. I packed the trunk of my car over 3 days. Slowly, methodically. I didn't take everything. Just what I needed to begin again. Pair of comfortable shoes, my kettle, my journals, my letters, my mother's ring. It's a blanket David used to wrap around himself when he was sick. I took that too, not out of sentiment, but because it had my scent, not theirs. By the time their flight approached, I was ready. I drove them to the airport like nothing had changed, helped with the bags, smiled when they thanked me, casually, offhandedly, like it was a favor, not a routine. David said he'd text me from the gate. He didn't. I waited until I saw them through the glass. Watched the kids run ahead. Watched Hannah pull out her phone. Watched David lean against a pole like the world owed him rest. Then I walked away. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. I drove to the motel just outside the county line. A place one once. Stayed during a storm when the roads were closed. Small, clean, quiet. The woman behind the desk asked if I needed help with my bags. I told her no. I had carried heavier things. Inside the room. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the window. Listened to the hum of a highway. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just breathed. For the first time in years, no one needed me to be useful. No one needed me to give. Or apologize. Or vanish. I was alone, and I was beginning to understand that. Alone wasn't the same as abandoned. One is a wound. The other is a choice. That night, I didn't dream of them. I dreamed of silence, and when I woke, it was still there, wrapped around. Me like a permission I'd waited decades for. The motel room was small, but it didn't feel cramped. It felt L, like four walls finally saying, "This space is yours." And no one will interrupt. I made tea on the hot plate in the corner, chamomile. The kind I used to drink in the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. Back when I still lived for their comfort, even in my own house. I'd wash dishes while they slept. Fold laundry while they packed for vacations I wasn't invited on. I used to believe love looked like that quiet service. No recognition. Just consistency. But now I knew better. Now my hands weren't busy with anyone's needs but mine. I sat cross-legged on the bed, tea in hand, and opened the notebook again. Not to write, but to read. I went back through everything I'd scribbled in the weeks leading up to their departure. My doubts, my warnings to myself, my bullet-pointed heartbreak. And beneath it all, my plan. I had written out the steps like instructions for a woman I hadn't fully become yet. But she was here now. I opened my laptop, logged into every account, slowly, deliberately. Changed passwords, removed shared access, froze secondary cards. Verified ownership of the car, the house, the pension account. Everything that had been ours, the accounts they used freely, became mine again. I moved money. Not much, just enough to make the point. Enough to ensure they wouldn't spend one more dollar assuming I'd keep nodding along. The quiet of it all was the most powerful part. There were no slammed doors, no yelling, no declarations. Just clicks. Confirmations, locks re-clicking into place. I updated my will. It's been meaning to for years. David was still listed as executor. That changed. I gave that role to someone else, a former colleague, kind and competent, who once told me I deserved a better life. I hadn't believed her then. I did now. I even wrote a letter, not to them, to myself, a kind of living will, not of money, but of memory. You are not bitter, I wrote. You are awake. You are not cruel. You are clearing the air. You are not walking away to punish. You are walking away to preserve. There was nothing dramatic about my exit. That's the part people don't understand. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means complete. I left a note on the kitchen table before. I left one sentence, handwritten.com/gone to rest. Please do not follow. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. I packed up what little remained in the car and left the garage remote on the shelf. Took the spare key off my ring and placed it next to the refrigerator magnet shaped like a duck, the one David made in second grade. I let it sit there, his little craft, next to my key. Oh, both things he never valued enough to keep close. I mailed a few final documents from a Dropbox downtown. Removed my name from utilities. Set up a forwarding address to a P.O. box. I wasn't hiding. Sprook. I was UNHOOKING. By noon, I was on the highway, driving without a destination. Just west. Ward warmth, I think. Not weather feeling. I stopped. At a roadside diner near a field of tall grass. Ordered pancakes I didn't have to share. The waitress called me ma'am and gave me extra syrup without asking. She didn't know my story. Didn't care. That was the piece of it. To be nobody for once and still be treated with care. I stayed in that town 2 nights. Found a library with a little reading room and a secondhand shop where I bought a new kettle for $3.75. I didn't speak to many people. Just nodded, smiled, listened. The phone buzzed, of course. The messages began once their cards stopped working. Where are you? Is something wrong with the bank? Did you change something? Call me, Mom. Not even please, at first. It's just confusion dressed up as concern. I didn't respond. I let the silence work. It's amazing how quickly they notice absence when it's connected to inconvenience. They hadn't noticed my silence when I sat at their table. But they noticed now when the hotel asked for a new card. When the flight upgrade disappeared. When the spa canceled the appointment. When the rental car demanded full payment. They didn't miss me. They missed what I gave. There's a difference. I stayed in that little town a week. Rented a small room with faded blue curtains and a desk facing a tree. I cooked my own meals. Walked each morning. Smiled at strangers who had no reason to lie to me. I felt the world shift. Not all at once. But in the small ways that tell you, you've returned to yourself. I didn't need to explain where I'd been. I didn't need to justify the stillness. I began sleeping through the night. No alarms, no dread, no half-heard footsteps outside my door. Just breath. Just the sound of my own life, finally uncluttered by other people's noise. It wasn't revenge. It was repair. It didn't take long. 2 days after they landed, the voicemails started piling up. I didn't listen right away. Just watched the screen light up. Name after name. David, Hannah, even Tasha, all calling from the same hotel Wi-Fi. I imagined standing in some lobby with their arms crossed and voices rising. The first message was short. Hey, Mom, something's off with the cards. Can you check? No warmth. It's just the assumption that I was sitting near a computer ready to fix things for them again. I let it sit. Didn't open the banking app. Didn't answer. Next came Hannah. Hi, sorry to bother. We're at the front desk. And the card isn't going through. They're saying it's frozen. Could you call and sort it out? They're holding our room. Still no question. No concern for whether I was okay. It's just urgency. As if I was their personal assistant who'd stepped out without. Leaving instructions. Then David again. Mom, this is getting ridiculous. The spa canceled. The hotel's asking us to pay again. I don't know what you did, but please call me back. Each message sounded more frantic than accusatory. Then panicked. By the 4th day, I finally played one out loud. Not because I wanted to hear their voices, but because I wanted to hear the shift. Mom, ... Are you okay? There it was. The turn. Not real concern, just the creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't playing my part anymore. The part of the quiet helper, the invisible benefactor, the open wallet that never asked questions. Hannah left one more message that week. A longer one. We're trying to understand. Did something happen? If you're upset, we can talk. For right now, we're stranded and this is really stressful for the kids. We just need to figure this out. Not sorry, just stressed. For the kids. Always. A reason. Always someone else's needs placed in front of mine, as if motherhood means never having a boundary they must respect. I didn't respond. I brewed a cup of tea and watched the rain hit the window in slow diagonal lines. That motel had the quietest storm I'd ever heard. On the 5th day, they emailed. Subject line, urgent. David wrote that they had to use a different card. That they were now stuck with charges they weren't expecting. that he wished I had communicated before doing something so drastic. Drastic. The word stuck to me like static. I had paid for their entire vacation, and removing myself, that was the drastic part. Not excluding me, not lying about seat numbers, not whispering behind my back that it would be more peaceful without me. No, the crime was my silence. Because silence, when it comes from a woman like me, isn't expected. We're supposed to absorb, smile, nod, die quietly while they vacation on our dime. But I didn't die. I just disappeared. On purpose, that night they started texting more personally. Not about the money, about me, mom, ... Are you upset about the trip? We didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought you'd be more comfortable at home. You said you don't like flying. You said you get tired easily. We didn't want to overwhelm you. Excuses dressed as kindness. Polite little justifications. So they didn't have to call it what it was. Exclusion. Discarding. Deciding I was no longer worth the space. I turned my phone off, not out of anger, out of peace. Because sometimes peace looks like ending the conversation before they twist the knife again. I walked down to the laundromat that night, folded my clothes slowly, pressed the warm towel to my face and just breathed it in. No one interrupted. No one asked for anything. The woman at the end machine offered me half her Kit Kat. Said she liked my shoes. That was the first kindness I'd received in a week. From a stranger. Not a son, not a daughter-in-law. A stranger who didn't know my name but offered something sweet without asking for anything in return. I went back to the motel and took a long bath. Lit a candle from the dollar store. Wrote a single sentence in my notebook. Let them unravel. And they did. By day 7, I got a call from the hotel front desk. They said the guests under my name had checked out early, that the card on file had been removed and they were now settling with a different payment method. I thanked them, hung up, closed the account. By then, the messages had gone quiet. The panic had passed through its final stage. Withdrawal. They weren't calling anymore, and I didn't miss the sound. My quiet was no longer something to be broken. It was something I'd earned. I walked to the corner diner the next morning, sat at the counter and had a proper breakfast. Eggs and toast and jam that didn't come from a packet. I brought a book. Not to read, just to keep me company. The waitress asked if I wanted more coffee. I said yes. And when she refilled my cup, I smiled and thought, this is what a good morning feels like. Not texts, not explanations, just warm food. Simple. Kindness and the knowledge that I'd finally stopped chasing love that was only ever half offered. The town was small, no more than a few thousand people, if that. The kind of place where the same dog wanders across the same porch every morning. Where the post office closes early and no one minds. It was the first place in a long time where no one knew my name, and that felt like a blessing. I didn't plan to stay. At first, the motel was just a stopover, a place to catch my breath. But the stillness grew on me. The quiet wasn't empty. It was soft. Room to think without being interrupted. Room to rest without guilt crawling up behind it. There was a church 2 blocks down. Not the kind I was used to, with long sermons and silent pews. This one had chipped paint, wind chimes, and a community garden behind it. I walked past it most days, always thinking I'd just look. One afternoon, I went inside. There were no prayers, no ceremony, just a few people rearranging chairs and folding bulletins. One woman, Clara, nodded at me like she'd been waiting. For me, she was wearing a faded apron with a sun stitched on the pocket. She asked if I was new in town. I said I was passing through. She smiled and said, sometimes passing through becomes staying. Clara ran the free lunch every Friday. I didn't need a meal, but I offered to help. Sliced bread, peeled carrots, set chairs. It felt good to move my hands for something other than obligation. No one asked who I was. No one asked why I was there. They just made space. After that, I started walking to the library every morning. It was small, just 2 rooms and a cracked Coffee machine, but it had large windows that let the light in. I borrowed books I'd never let myself read before. Mysteries, memoirs, even a gardening guide for a garden I didn't have. The librarian's name was Marcy. She was in her 60s, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had a dry laugh that always made me smile. One day she asked if I wanted to join the book circle. I hesitated, almost said no, out of habit. Then I nodded. The next Thursday, I sat. In a circle of strangers, all of us talking about a novel none of us really liked. And yet, I laughed. I laughed like I hadn't in months, the kind of laugh that shakes something loose in your chest. For a few minutes, I forgot what silence used to mean. They didn't know anything about David or Hannah, or the flight never boarded, or the bank accounts I closed. They didn't know I had spent years living like a shadow in my own family's home. I didn't need to. They liked me just as I was, a woman with soft shoes and a quiet voice who brought homemade lemon cookies. Clara invited me to her porch one Saturday. She had a rocking chair waiting, as if she'd been saving it for me. We sat for hours watching the light move across the trees. She didn't ask about my past. She just handed me a glass of iced tea and said, "It's nice to have another woman around who understands what quiet means." In those weeks, I started to feel myself return. Not the version they remembered. The version who cooked for holidays and smiled at insults and paid for things without being asked. She was gone. This version moved slower, but with more purpose. She didn't rush to fill silences. She didn't shrink in rooms. She knew her worth, not loudly, but solidly. I began writing again. Not lists or banking notes, but thoughts, little poems, fragments of memory. One morning I wrote a line I still remember. I am not what they left behind. I am what I walked toward. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. I found a room to rent above a florist's shop, small, sunlit, with a little stove and a window that faced the street. I paid the first month in cash. The landlord, a soft-spoken man with arthritis and a love for crossword puzzles, said I reminded him of his mother. I smiled and told him that was a good start. I bought a second-hand table and one chair. Just one. Not because I was lonely, because I wasn't performing anymore. I didn't need to keep a seat open, hoping someone would show up. Most evenings, I walked down to the lake at the edge of town. Just sat, listened, watched the water hold the light. Sometimes there were children skipping stones. Sometimes couples held hands. Sometimes it was just me and the herons, the wind, the silence. And for once, silence didn't ache. It soothed. I wasn't missing anything. I wasn't being left out. I had simply stepped outside the room where I was never truly seen. The texts from David slowed, then stopped. I kept the phone, but I turned off notifications, not out of cruelty, just to preserve the peace I'd found. One message came through last week. Just a line. "We're home. Hope you're okay." I read it without feeling anything. No surge of pain, no anger. Just a gentle acknowledgement. Yes, I'm okay. More than okay. I didn't reply. I placed a phone face down and went back to my tea. Because this life quiet, small, mine didn't require anyone else's permission. It was a Tuesday when he showed up. I'd just come back from the market. 2 bags of simple things. Lentils, apples, bread. The sun was sharp that morning, the kind that makes shadows softer. I was humming, I think. Something from childhood, though I didn't know where it came from. He was standing by the stoop. Same leather jacket, same stance, one hand in his pocket. The other holding a coffee I knew wasn't for me. I stopped walking. He didn't speak right away. Just nodded, like we were neighbors who hadn't seen each other in years. And maybe, in a way, that's what we were. David had aged. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. His face was drawn in a little, less certainty in the eyes. A line between the brows that hadn't been there before. He looked like a man carrying something he didn't expect to hold. I stepped around him slowly, opened the door to the shop entrance, nodded to the florist behind the counter, climbed the stairs to my room. I didn't invite him up, but I didn't shut the door fast enough either. He followed. I heard the footsteps. Not urgent, just steady. Like he thought he had the right. I didn't say anything until we were both standing in my small kitchen. He looked around, said it was nice, said it smelled like something warm. I said, "It's mine." He nodded, stood in the doorway, unsure of where to sit. I didn't offer a chair. There was only one. I poured myself a glass of water. Waited. He spoke after a while. Said they'd come back from the trip and found the house quiet. Said he'd been trying to give me space. Said he didn't understand. What had gone wrong? I didn't flinch. Didn't react. That was the gift of time. It empties certain reactions. Makes space for seeing things without shaking. He asked if I was angry. I said no. He asked if I was hurt. I said I was. He swallowed hard, like he didn't expect honesty. Then he said, "We didn't mean to exclude you. We just thought it would be easier." That word again. Easier. I set the glass down. Let the silence settle. Then I told him what I needed to say. "You made a plan, paid with my card, laughed at my house, left me out of something I paid for. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a decision." He looked down, said he was sorry. I nodded. "I believe you are. But not because it hurt me, because it inconvenienced you." He didn't deny it. That I respected. He said Hannah wanted to write me, that the kids missed me. I said, "That's nice." He asked if I'd ever come back. And for a moment, I saw him as the boy he once was, standing in a doorway with dirt on his knees and a dandelion in his hand, asking if I was still proud of him. Didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I don't live there anymore." He asked if I meant the house. I said no. He stood a little straighter then, like he understood, really understood. I think he wanted more. It's a chance to fix it. But some things don't need fixing. They need acknowledging. Sitting in the middle of the break and letting it be what it is, I told him. I wished them peace. That I was building something else now. That I was not angry. But I was done. He asked if he could call again. I said, "You can," but I didn't say I'd answer. Before he left, he paused in the doorway, turned back and said he missed me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't say it back just to be kind. I only said, "I hope you remember that next time you're making room for someone." Then I closed the door, not quickly, not harshly, just with finality. I sat in the one chair, let the quiet return, let the moment settle. There was no triumph, only truth. And that was enough. It's been 3 months now. The florist downstairs knows my name. So does the woman at the library. I have a favorite spot by the window where the sun lands around noon. It warms my hands while I write. There's a rhythm to things here. Tuesday soup at the church. Thursday, book circle. Fridays, I walk to the lake and sit with my thoughts. No one rushes. No one interrupts. The quiet is mine now, not something imposed, but something chosen. I don't think about the house much anymore. The one where I raised David. The one where I packed lunches and folded shirts and paid bills in the dark so he'd never see the weight of them. That house doesn't hold me now. It's just a building full of echoes. I've stopped chasing. I left a few things behind when I walked out of that life. A casserole dish, a photo frame. It's the brown coat he always said looked too big on me. A tote. Miss any of it? What I have now fits better. A smaller room, smaller table, quieter voice, but one that belongs entirely to me. Some days, I see mothers at the market with their grown children, talking, laughing, choosing apples. I watch them, without envy. I've stopped asking why that wasn't mine, stopped wondering what I did wrong. Some questions don't need answers. They just need space to be put down. There are no more messages from David. No emails, no voicemails. I think he understood, finally, that silence can be final. Not angry, not bitter, just complete. And in that silence, I've learned things. I've learned how much I gave away in the name of love. How many times I said yes when I was empty. How often I taught them I would come last. And how well they learned it. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean return. Sometimes it means release. I've learned that people don't have to hit you to hurt you. That exclusion leaves bruises you can't point to. That kindness, when selective, is its own kind of cruelty. And I've learned slowly, gently, that I am still whole, even after being broken. Last week, I bought a seashell from the thrift store. Large, soft pink, a curl of ocean trapped. In its shape, I placed it on my windowsill. When the wind comes through just right, it hums. A low, breathy sound. Not music. Not quite, but something close to belonging. I named it Peace, not for what I lost, for what I claimed. Clara asked me the other day if I ever thought about going back. I told her no, not because I hate them. I don't. But because I finally love myself too much to fit back into something that made me small. She nodded, said, "You don't owe anyone your undoing." I wrote that in my notebook. You don't owe anyone your undoing. There's a kind of power that comes with age. Not the kind you wield, it's the kind you carry quietly. Like a scar you stopped hiding. It's like a name you remember when others tried to rename you. I know who I am now. Not mom, the bank, not grandma, the background. Not the woman who drives but isn't. Invited to sit at the table, I am the woman who left with nothing but her name. And made that enough. The sea is still far from here. I may never reach it. But I don't need to. That shell on my window sings every morning. It's all the ocean I need. I sit beside it, cup of tea in hand, notebook open, and I write these last lines not for them. Not for closure, but for myself. I was never too much. I was never a burden. I was never unlovable. I was just too quiet in the face of harm. Now I speak. Not loudly, not often, but when I do, 'tis with the certainty of someone who has lived a life of service and finally stepped into a life of self. There is no audience. Here, no applause, just peace. And that's enough. The end.